Okay,
Be ready.
so welcome to the February meeting of the Southampton Village Planning Commission. I want to start out by reviewing a few status items. So number one, in December at the Planning Commission meeting, we forwarded to the trustees a proposal to modify the gross floor area from 12 plus 1,500 square feet to 10 plus 1,500 square feet. There is now a draft, there's draft village code that has been prepared by the village attorney. And there is a public hearing on February 8th, next Thursday night, to open up that discussion. I encourage everyone to attend and voice their thoughts. This has been part of our long-term of the last few years, examination of the village zoning code, and followed a series of public workshops and a report from Studio AB. At the trustees meeting next week, we'll be doing a presentation that explains both the analysis that Studio AB undertook, what they found in terms of what was being built in the village, how other municipalities in the East End have looked at this issue, and then we'll go through what impact it has across different building lots. So we certainly encourage everybody to attend that hearing, speak up, and I think I assume the trustees will be holding the hearing open, so people will have more time to give their thoughts. So that's first. Secondly, I just want to mention at the last meeting, we talked about night skies. We asked Ed Carrigan to take a look at it. Ed has been working, and he will come to the next meeting with a draft of what he thinks we should move forward. The draft that he is looking at really is based on the Southampton Town Code, but with some changes to make it more relevant to the village. Because, for example, there's a lot of that code talks about parcels on County Road 39, and that's not a major piece of the village. Obviously, we have the village downtown, which is a different circumstance. So he's going to take it and modify it, and she should have that ready for the next meeting. And I'm going to try to get that around to everyone before the meeting, so we all have time to take a look at it.
In that dark sky regulations, I was thinking about it, and I thought that maybe we could have an exception, either an exception or that somebody who has very large property, like multiple acres, could possibly get a waiver of that requirement if they want to do it within their property,
Right.
and there is no impact on the neighbors.
Right, so if it were maybe something like if it was a certain area away from any neighboring
Like
property.
in the estate section, somebody
Right.
has like 2-3 acres,
Right.
he wants to shine his trees up.
Right, in the middle of the lot, it's not going to really impact anybody else.
Right.
Right, okay. So that, I think we'll hopefully have a draft in the next few weeks, and then at our March meeting, be able to take a look at it and see, and move it along. Next, we have been working, and again, I hope to get that out in the next few weeks. We have been working, and I should give credit to Eldon Scott, has been working hard. Member of the Planning Commission has been working hard on examining a possible call for an RFP for consultants to look at our existing historic district in the village, and what changes need to be made. And those changes might have to do with the existing design guidelines for the historic district, which are have been around for a long time and maybe need to be re-examined, and process in that historic district, and then any potential expansion of the historic district. Eldon's been working on putting together a draft RFP. He's also been researching potential firms that we could send an RFP to. And I think if we do move forward with this, this is something that we would very much hope we could work jointly with the ARB, because they obviously are the most knowledgeable, have the most experience with the historic district. But it's something that I think has been talked about for a long time. There was a report in 2000, I think, and then again in '07, which looked at the historic district, but it's obviously, they're both fairly dated, and people's thoughts have changed, and obviously the environment in the village has changed. So, to use an example, there are buildings that were built in the 30s that I think when the original historic district was done were not imagined to be particularly important, but as the historic consultant to the ARB pointed out 2 years ago, when there were some applications relating to those houses, those are buildings that we would now think of as potentially having historic merit. So, so we definitely think it's time for an updating. Our role, as it would be, as it has been on past requests for proposals and reports, I think can be to help frame it. But again, I think we very much need the input of the ARB, who will be working with it. So I wanted to mention that was going on.
But you can say like a joint meeting or like a joint forum?
Right, I would hope that we'll figure out some way to work jointly, maybe set up a committee of members, both of the Planning Commission and the ARB, so that we could jointly work on it, jointly interview consultants. I think a joint approach makes a lot of sense in this case, because they are going to be the ones who are going to have to work with whatever the results are. And I think they also have, all the members of the ARB, particularly those who have been on for several years, have a tremendous amount of experience with sort of the issues that they're seeing. We obviously don't work on individual applications, so we don't have as much experience. Yeah. So I wanted to mention that. And then Mark, let's talk about
the wastewater.
right. Yeah. Yep.
I went back into my files to look at what was done in 2014, when at that time we were proposing to create a central wastewater collection system for the village business district, and we had sort of defined a proposed sewer district that covered most of the village business district. At that time, we opted to go with the central collection, with a central plant,
Right.
and I think the cost turned out to be close to the upper 20.
Yep. 28 million.
$28 million,
Right.
which really didn't really make it that feasible. One of the issue was that the way it was priced because we have to use prevailing wages.
Right. Right.
We have to use prevailing wage. So there were one other proposal was to use a different type of system, which is now being approved by the health department.
Yeah, so we should probably explain. When we were working on the sewer system, which is I think 2 years ago.
2014.
2014, right. The county had not approved anything other than these consolidated facilities.
Right, at that time,
Right.
they really only went with very conventional type systems.
Right.
And since then, there is another sort of a newer type of system
Right.
that was actually the engineer who was proposing this had already made a presentation at that time. And I think it would be worth to look into it. Basically, the difference between the systems, that the conventional systems are, you have all of the raw sewage goes into a new plant, let's say a sewage treatment plant, that treats, and then there's the fans, and there's a whole process that
Right.
treats the waste. This system that treats the waste, and then it goes into a leaching pools. This system, we call it the nitrate system, basically you have a septic tank.
Right.
So it's very similar to a conventional septic system. You have a septic tank, a centralized septic tank, and then what they do, they only treat the effluent from the septic system. You know what I'm saying? It's
Right,
only, so
right.
the effluent, which is clear water, so the only treat that, so that allows to have a much smaller system, and we could, so here there was a proposal to create 8 of them, but I think in this case, if we could create like 8 of maybe 4 mini systems, one in the central parking lot here, one behind the movie theater, maybe one behind the Red Bar,
Right.
maybe one by Fellingham or Cinderella, and that would handle a lot of the area of the Village Business District, and would allow them to be able to open new restaurants and having new wet uses in the Village Business District. So,
Mark, do we have any idea what these cost, these smaller systems?
this type of system, I think, cost, it's a fraction, maybe like I would say either in a third to a half of what the sewage treatment plant system would cost. So, and right now it has been approved, so it would be a little bit more complex in terms of creation of a sewer district, because this is still considered what's called a sewage treatment plant. So you have to create a sewer district, which then manages the wastewater plant.
But could this be something that, for example, let's say you put one in back of Little Red, in that,
Yes.
in back of the stores that face on Job's Lane. Could that be voluntary, where the buildings could choose to go into the sewer system, and then when they did, they would have the right to look at a wider range of uses, as opposed to making it required? Or is that still something you think you need to require people to
I believe
participate?
because once you, let's say, the way we work, I think, the back of Little Red,
Right.
basically they would replace all of the smaller septic systems
Right,
or
right.
cesspools
Right,
that
right.
are at that location, go to a centralized, larger
Right,
septic system,
right.
and then put next to it a little plant that treats only
Right.
the effluent. Because in this case, you still have to, every maybe 6 or 7, 8 years,
Right.
go back and empty the septic tank. So I think most likely it would be mandatory, because you can't have somebody say, no, I'm going to keep my cesspool.
Right, right.
And you would have, and when you create a sewer district, then they connect to it. But I think it's for the greater good of everybody, to substantially enhance the water quality, allow more types of uses,
Right.
diversify the use, and with our zoning our zoning in place, we can still control
Right.
the development. So you cannot build larger structures anyway. So I think it would be worth to possibly maybe make a suggestion or a recommendation to the trustees to maybe go ahead and fund an additional study, where
Right.
we could we'll take this to the next step and have real numbers in terms of cost, in terms of more
Right.
feasibility studies.
So there would be a smaller facility that would replace the existing septic for, say, my example before, this is, in that case, the properties along the south side of Job's Lane.
Yes.
Everyone in it would have to enter into it, but they would only be paying for a plant that was handling their discharge. That's your approach, which makes a lot of sense to me.
Yes.
As opposed to them feeling they're paying for something that's handling the entire village.
Right.
Right. And they are paying now something for their sewer to be handled.
Removal, yeah, they're paying for the.
Right. I mean, the real upside, I think, for them is they would then have more diverse uses they could put in their property.
Well, I know they're looking to to redo that building, or to redo it with the fountain is, they want
Right.
to put that large building up, so that could be a good,
Right.
idea to do that in conjunction with this.
Right, and right now, if they did that, they would not be able to put a restaurant or any residences.
Right, exactly.
With the building, I think, was at the middle of the block, basically?
It's where the fountain is, it's where
Yeah.
all those old crooked buildings are.
On the south side of Job's Lane, where there's a fountain there, so remember little...
Yeah, yeah.
And they want to tear all that out and put
Yeah.
one.
Right,
Right, exactly.
right. But the problem now is they can't put housing in,
Right,
they can't put a restaurant in,
right.
so they're very
But then
limited on
what
what they can
use,
put in.
right. And then also what's happening is that really in that area, a lot of them have failed septic systems.
Right.
or old cesspools, and because they are so-called grandfathered, you have no, you don't have to do it, and I
Right.
think it's not really right.
And we talked about it in terms of parking lot, both because so much is around the parking lot, but also if the parking lot is redone, which it
Yes,
terribly needs to be redone, that would be a great opportunity to do something like this.
Also
Yeah.
back here as well.
That's what I was saying, yeah. That part, I'm sorry, I meant that main
But
parking
didn't you
lot.
mention also, Paul, that if the village were to redesign and get 20% more parking, so if you were
Yeah.
to do all this in conjunction
Right,
with
right.
Yes.
septic, that'd be the
Right,
best
right,
approach.
right.
yes. So the idea is that also there are some, not to put pressure on it, I think there is some urgency for us to do it, but also, come I think in July, there is a number of grants that are going to come available from the state.
That's interesting.
From the state. And if we are able to fund a study that makes it sort of almost shovel ready, then there will be an opportunity to go after those grants.
And is this through the State Department of Environmental Protection or?
Yes,
Okay.
conservation,
Conservation, sorry, yes, DEC.
DEC.
Right.
So there are some grants for specifically for this,
Right.
the clean water and wastewater.
And also, wouldn't that would the CPF 2%, 2%, wouldn't that qualify as well?
Well, it's interesting. I mean, I think if I understand, the new CPF rules allow.
Is that for housing or just for residents? Or
I thought there was some ability to use CPF money for clean water.
There is, but
Right.
not for sewage treatment.
Right.
That's the breakdown I have to find out
Right.
more on, but it's 20% of a set aside. The large portion, as we understand, is currently being used for residential septic upgrade grants.
Right.
Oh, yeah, it could be considered.
Yeah,
an
that's what I'm
system.
saying, yeah.
Right.
It's a different,
It's not residential, but it's...
right. So this is sort of, now it's allowed, it's approved, that system is allowed, it's approved, it makes a lot of sense.
Maurice, do you know anybody else who's doing this now in the East End? Do you know of any cases of people doing?
Well, West Hampton's going full bore with the traditional system, I believe.
Really?
They're going full blown with this. I believe that the Montauk is studying,
This approach.
Montauk is studying this approach.
West Hampton's not, they're just going full on.
On a traditional sewer.
Yeah,
So stream plant.
which would be interesting to watch.
And of course, the irony of that is the mayor of West Hampton sat in at our sewer meetings when they were first thinking about it
And so all the back.
and decided to use our work to go forward in their village to doing a traditional sewer plant.
Do we know how they're paying for it?
I think a bond issue.
Yes.
I think it's like 30 million. then.
Yeah.
Okay.
There's a bond.
Yes, but here also you would need a bond, but I think that if we were to do, my guesstimate would be like around like 10 million, 10 to a million.
Which is very different amounts,
Yes,
right.
which would make it like 4 or 5 system at the
So
most.
like if it's 2.5 per system, it's a different type of economics.
Yes.
Right. And there's a limit to how much affluent any of these smaller systems can accomplish.
There is, but yes, indeed there is, but we are well within that range.
Okay.
See, there is,
Right.
although, that's why we would like smaller systems, we are well within that range.
Yeah.
So I think that if, now that we are 4, maybe we can
Why don't
vote.
we just, perfect. Yeah, why don't we do
I apologize for being late.
So we're just talking about the wastewater, the possibility to, instead of using one central system, to do multiple systems. Cool. And this had been proposed 4 years ago by an engineer, and at that time, the system was not approved. But now they did receive the approval from Suffolk County Health Department. So I thought that maybe we could make a recommendation for to the trustees to move forward with a study that would be good enough for us to then maybe apply for a grant.
Right.
There's going to be substantial grant money available come July
Yeah, fantastic.
from the state. And I think that if we were to handle, we were talking about the parking lot behind the bar, the one, the central parking lot here, and then, the movie theater, and then maybe the finance and.
So Mark, if I understand what you're saying, the first step would be to undertake a study to get more definition on cost.
Exactly.
And because then we could do some basic economics. Because I think the issue that we had last time was given the cost of the sewer, which I think was 28 mil, and people would assume would ultimately be a little higher. And if you divide it among the existing property owners in the village center, it was a significant amount of money per owner.
Right.
And so there was a lot of concern about that. If Mark's approach does lead to a cost that's a third of that, I think the cost would be much more manageable.
Right.
And would be able to be phased in, because the other part of the problem was with the big sewer plant is you have to do it all at once. Everyone has to pay whether or not they can take advantage of it, where if we did it in a phased way, maybe it could happen where when that happens, we can make sure that they're able to then, because the advantages are you can do, restaurant over the wet use, you can do residential use, gives you much more. The village is basically frozen at this point by the Suffolk County Health Department from doing anything but, what we would call hard goods.
Right.
And part of the problem right now, honestly, and it's more true now than it was in 2014, is, we are all seeing, some of us more painfully than others, I can personally attest to, the change in retail, which is not going to go back.
Right.
And so as more people buy online, the market for hard goods retailing is shrinking, and stores, where, 10 years ago, a company like J. Crew would think to be competitive, they had to have a maximum number of stores, so they wanted to have a store at every retail center. Now those companies are thinking they're selling online, and they are putting stores where they think it's important to them.
Right.
But we,
Like here and
Right, but the other thing I would say is historically many of the stores that were done here were not necessarily considered to be, it was not considered important that that store necessarily be a profitable store. It was done because they thought it was important for the brand.
boutique.
Right, and again, given the new economics of retail, that history of stores that don't have to make money but are important from a brand point of view is disappearing because retail companies don't have that type of economics anymore.
Right.
So the problem we have in the village is if you can't do restaurants or the wet uses, and if you can't do residential, there's a shrinking world of retailers who you're appealing to rent space.
Right.
So, I think it's becoming increasingly important that the village, if it's going to be a competitive center going forward, that we can have wet uses. And, we did, one of the other interesting things that happened after those hearings is, the trustees asked Chris Goba to do a study of Agawam Lake because there was a lot of mixed opinions about whether or not the village, the sewage from the village business district was a contributor to Lake Agawam's issues. And Chris Goba has a fairly comprehensive report that says yes, it's a major contributor to the problems in Lake Agawam. Not the only contributor, there's many problems in Lake Agawam,
Right.
but is a significant contributor. So it's probably worth us looking again, and because if there's a more economic answer,
Right.
I think it would have a different result.
Yep. I would agree.
And as you said, this can be phased in also. We don't need to build all of the systems at once.
Right. The one, for example, a good example is we know that there's been continuing issues with the existing cesspools in the properties that border the south side of Job's Lane.
Yes.
Those are probably the worst in the village and the ones that are closest to the
To Lake Agawam.
to Lake Agawam and to the water table.
Right.
That's a good example where that might actually begin to really help clean things up. And many of those businesses really have a big issue because they're really at their limits already.
Right.
So it's an interesting, very interesting, and an interesting approach, certainly.
I mean, this system, just to zero in here, the major difference between this system is that these systems have, they have a big septic tank.
Okay.
So whereas on the conventional systems, to complete the wastewater, with the solids and liquids and everything else, comes into like a little plant that treats everything. With this system, there is still a septic tank, and you only treat the effluent from the septic system, the septic tank.
Okay.
So you're able to treat it to a very high quality standard, actually.
And it's, like you said, it's all approved by Suffolk County Health?
Yes, just.
And that just happened in the last few months.
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Suffolk County's been very tough on these
Right,
and took a long time to sign off.
right.
So,
So then this technology must be being used in other places now, right?
But it's just coming to Suffolk County. I think that Montauk is looking into it.
But I mean, like other states?
Yeah. So I think it's just a smart idea. You still have the tanks, and still eventually you have to pump the tank.
Okay.
But and then there's some requirements of Suffolk County when you create a sewer district as to who can manage those plants.
Okay.
So this is pretty regulated. But we would create a sewer district maybe that has all of these plants
Mhm.
together, one district, so you have one unit that operates all of them.
Neat. Yeah.
And I think we could put together like a little proposal
that'd be great.
that we submit to the trustees.
Right.
And then so we can get a proposal from
Right.
that company who installs it, designs and installs it, to put together a little study that would be good enough for us to be able to use to apply for grants
Right.
come July when
Right, right.
the grants are released.
And also, there's a conversation we have to have again with the public and with the property owners in the village center.
Yes.
Because obviously, there's a lot of concern back in 2014 about the proposal, about the cost of it, about the ability to sustain it. So if we have a really different approach, we want to go back to them,
Yes.
because I think their buy-in is incredibly important.
Yes, you're absolutely right.
Right.
But the ability to also get grants, and I think this area being such a sensitive area,
Right.
I think that would be a big component if we're able
Right.
to.
Yeah.
Great.
So, Ed, do you want to talk about what you've been finding out on dark skies? And you sent me a note, but maybe we just,
Yeah, so I read through the package that we had started with last month,
right,
which I guess is just flat out copy of the
right,
Southampton Town Code.
right.
It's very in-depth detail,
Mm-hmm.
which I think is fantastic. And it even goes that, so they're not going to make the residents go and change their light fixtures,
Mhm.
but if they replace a light fixture, it has to abide by the new law.
Right,
And the electrician installing it, if the electrician is caught installing an illegal fixture, basically,
Right.
he is fined, or she is fined, the electrician is then fined.
right,
So, I think it has a lot of merit
great.
and traction for us. The one section I'm not sure how it pertains, if it is a concern for us, is page 8, section 6, talks about all of the light-released non-conforming fixtures, which I assume are the streetlights.
Right,
So I wanted to talk to Gary to know if he had any information. as to
right,
that.
right.
And maybe this is something LIPA, which is PSE&G now, has already been phasing in, I just don't know.
Right, right.
I think in the village, it's owned by the village.
Okay. All the streetlights are owned by the village?
I
Really?
believe that, yes, they are owned and maintained by the village.
Yeah,
Whereas in the town, there's a lot of lights that are not.
the town don't own that
They
PSE&G.
don't own all the.
Right, so the question, I guess, for Gary is what is the village's ability over time to replace its lights?
And their willingness, I guess.
Right,
and all
right,
that.
and do those fixtures accommodate
Right,
the new type of lighting?
Yep.
Right?
yep.
Because if I remember, there's 3 or 4 different types of streetlights right now in the village?
Right,
Right,
Yeah, it's at least 4, right? I
right,
think.
yeah, yeah.
they're similar, but they are definitely not
But we
There's
have,
no one.
yeah, we have,
Definitely not dark sky.
Right.
we have Cobra lights on most of the residential streets. You have the older style lights that are in the village center. I mean, you have 3 or 4 different standards in the village.
One item that we talked about, I mentioned before, but was that on the, possibly get a waiver or an exception on the very large property, you know, like in the estate section, that if somebody in the middle of his property wants to light up his street and it doesn't impact any neighbors, I think that maybe they should be allowed to do it.
And there's talk about how, individual applicants can, get relief, like a variance, if you will.
Right.
And they didn't use a variance, but the governing body has the option to,
That's great.
yeah.
Yes.
So I thought it was very comprehensive and very fair at the end of the day.
So this is something we should think about as sort of, so I guess the right thing would be to take this, why don't we write up something for the next meeting and then vote on something we would forward to the trustees and the village attorney
Okay.
to set a standard for a new code. 'Cause we right now have really no code on outdoor lighting.
Right.
I mean, we could adopt this one with an addendum.
Right.
Yeah. And, what I like about this also is that the town is already doing it, so now
Right.
we're just,
And
not
I-
going to be any different.
Yeah,
It's
and
fine.
I asked someone, and they said they thought the town had not had any major issues with it. That it was
Yeah.
fairly
I
successful.
think one issue that the town has had, I mean, that they've been made aware of, is that this does not address the lights that come out from, let's say, somebody from inside the house.
Right. We've spoken about this at the last meeting.
That somebody has a studio and he uses extremely bright lights and shines onto his neighbor.
Right, right.
And they've had a lot of disputes at the town board where people make complaints about, and it's not addressed in their dark
Right.
sky because it's not really a dark sky. Or people who put like light fixtures on their houses,
Right,
really
right.
shine too high voltage.
Right. I think a light fixture on the
Light
house is handled
addressed.
here.
I'm sorry, yeah.
Yeah.
It's really more for
Right.
lights inside.
The inside is not addressed.
Shining a spotlight out of your
Right,
your window.
right, right.
Yeah.
Okay. So, so let me just, so we talked at the beginning of the meeting when you weren't here, and I just wanted to mention. So, as you know, I think I circulated to the members of the commission the draft code that the village attorney put together after we had our vote in December on the modification of Gross Floor area. The trustees are having a public hearing
Right.
next Thursday night, even though that hurt. I think that hearing will probably stay open, because I think, we anticipate there'll be a lot of input from village residents and business owners.
Right.
And so what I've asked Studio AB to do for that meeting is to put together a presentation that explains the report, in relation to gross floor area issues, the workshops, and then the analysis, and then a brief comparison of this to the gross floor area provisions in other municipalities on the East End.
Okay.
And that hopefully will form a basis for, I think it will be a vigorous public conversation, right? So, which I think is good. I think these are important issues, and it's good to get these conversations out in public. So I certainly would strongly encourage everyone to attend, because I also think we learn when we hear from members of the public, certainly,
Right.
about their issues. So,
Perfect.
yeah. So anything else? We have a meeting as short as the month. So in the shortest month of the year, we're going to have our shortest meeting of the year. So that concludes the February meeting of the Southampton Village Planning Commission. I think our March meeting is also very early in the month.
Yeah.
Maybe the 3rd or something. Thank you very much.
Maybe the
for coming.
first, no?
Is it the 1st?
First.
It's the 1st, yeah. So again, it'll be very early, yeah. So, okay. Thank you.
Thank you.